Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing our series of covering every single specialization in Dragonflight, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite tank specs, the Brewmaster Monk in Mythic Plus. We'll go over all the abilities and synergies and rotations you have to be aware of, as well as allow you to import a special build for Mythic Plus from the description into your game directly. You can have your build ready to go, and we'll give you everything that you need to get started and succeed as a Brewmaster Monk in Mythic Plus. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below. It helps me out tremendously. Subscribe for more gaming content, and if you want to, or if you like to, or you know what, you have to, come by my Twitch stream. I'm live every single day, twitch.tv/Drybear. Say hello. All right, let's talk Brewmaster Monk. I would say it definitely is the most complicated or complex tank to play in Dragonflight right now, partially because they have a bit of a global cooldown button crisis. They just have so many abilities that can always be used and managed and juggled that even when you have to expend one global cooldown on healing yourself or doing some kind of utility, it hurts because you have so many things you have to do, which can lead to a little bit of overwhelming experience for people that are playing Brewmaster, but also can lead to some really fun depth that you can get into and play as you play the class. And don't worry, if you're interested in Brewmaster, there are ways that I'll teach you that you can simplify some of the abilities and then add them in later as you get more comfortable with the spec. But first, let's begin by going over the basics so everyone's on the same page for how Brewmaster works, what the mechanics are, and everything in between. The Brewmaster's premier mechanic and their way to deal with damage in general is their stagger mechanic. And you can see this on screen on the little loadout here. If you'd like, I can leave my my weak ores down below in the description if you're looking to copy them or you want to import them in. But the way this stagger mechanic works is that passively, based on your specialization and stats, you will actually stagger attacks. So when you take physical damage based on what stats you have and what you have active, part of that damage that you take will be staggered, it'll be delayed. Same thing goes for magical attacks at reduced effectiveness. So if something hits you for 100 damage, you'll reduce that by extending out the damage window and taking that damage over time rather than taking it directly. And your first question is going to be, why does that matter? Like, obviously it's still going to be the same amount of damage taken, right? Well, part of the gameplay for Brewmaster is taking that damage. So as you get hit, you can see, this is my stagger meter. I have it lit here. You can also see the stagger meter as a setup here, but you can see just as you start building up that stagger and it starts building and building, then you start building up stagger and you can do things with it which are really cool. And that begins with your first cooldown, Purifying Brew. So what this does is it clears half of the stagger that you currently have, and then it'll start stacking up as well. It increases the absorption of your next Celestial Brew, which is going to be one of your big usages for cooldown, damage reduction, and staying alive. And there's a lot of mechanics that go into this one specifically, but you'll be able to just clear stagger. So you build up stagger and you clear some of it, which means that obviously when you cleared stagger, that damage that would have been dealt to you over time is now gone. You effectively removed it. It is essentially a form of damage reduction once you purify it. Instantly heals you for 25% of the damage dealt. So you're actually motivated to clear more stagger. The more stagger you have, the stronger you are. Because, as you can see by the stagger here, Purifying Brew is a percentage. So if you get high stagger values and you're clearing 50% of that, then you're clearing more damage that you would have taken with every Purify. And this is the reason why Brewmaster Monks are the best. They're at their peak in dealing with medium to high difficulty content. They're one of the weaker tanks when dealing with very easy content because if they don't have a lot of damage to stagger, then their mechanics kind of become weaker and they don't really have a lot going on. So it makes them super fun to play in really high keys because 20 plus, you're taking damage so extensively that your stagger is just gonna fill up all the way. If you have moderate stagger, it's green. If you have more than that, it's yellow. And then if you have really high stagger, it's red. So you often will hear people say that they wait until they have red stagger, they purify it to heal themselves and cleanse that stagger, and then they can use it for a shield. Next, let's talk about your shield cooldown, Celestial Brew. You activate this and it'll give you at base a kind of minor, relatively okay amount of absorb for a couple seconds, like 5 or 6 seconds. You'll have that active and it'll absorb damage. However, every time you purify, so when you're purifying stagger damage, it adds a stack which can increase the absorption by a significant amount. So if we're taking damage here and we're building up stagger, we're building up stagger, and we're building up stagger and doing all that, then when we're ready to go, we can cleanse that stagger, and you can see that I get a stack of purified chi. Increases the absorption of your next pure celestial brew by 20%, and that can go up to 200% at 10 stacks. 10 stacks massively. There's situations where you can just eat an entire mechanic and your health bar won't move because you're able to build up to a 10 stack celestial brew, which is super, super tanky. Now you have 2 charges of purifying brew, and this is on a 14-second cooldown. And so you want to be using this regularly. Obviously, you started off because you want this to be on cooldown, so you're kind of letting it go. And you want to make sure, even if you're not taking any damage, you want to be stacking up the purified chi. So you're doing that there. But you want to make sure that you are trying to save it without wasting any cooldowns for as high a stagger as possible, because again, when you purify, it's a percentage of your current stagger. So that's the stagger mechanic, and we'll go over some more details based on the tree that you have here when we get to the talent section of it, but that's how the stagger mechanic works. You also have a self-heal, which is kind of pretty basic. You actually have your Expel Harm, and what's good is that when you are spawning spheres from your Gift of the Ox, you'll be able to absorb those with Expel Harm, and then as those build up, you'll have a way to kind of track those and suck those in and then keep yourself healed. Next, let's talk about your passive tankiness, because it's important for understanding why your rotation is set up the way that it is, because you have these kind of passives. So the first one to look at is Shuffle. This one is super important. While Shuffle is active, it increases the effectiveness of your stagger by double. So you're able to double your stagger. You want to have Shuffle up at all times. Shuffle is granted by attacking enemies with your Keg Smash, Blackout Kick, or Spinning Crane Kick. So when you use these abilities and you hit an enemy with it, you'll be able to gain Shuffle. You need to have this up. It'll extend the duration. You'll get more and more from it. But it's important that you're keeping these abilities on cooldown, because it will give you Shuffle. Better stagger means more healing, means more recovery, means bigger shields. So all of that is very important for your passive rotation. You also have Spirit of the Ox. This is drops the Gift of the Ox orbs that I was talking about. Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick have a chance to summon these. And so you really need to be keeping Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick on cooldown, because not only will it trigger your stagger, or trigger your Shuffle to keep that up and going, it also has a chance to spawn a sphere, this little sphere here, which I can either walk over and heal, or if I would like, I can use Expel Harm, and when I heal myself with Expel Harm, it'll suck all those orbs in and heal me up as well. So it's a way to heal yourself up. Next is Celestial Fortune. This will make more sense when we have the stat weightings, but this is why critical strike chance is so valuable for Brewmasters, is that you have a chance equal to your crit chance to be healed for an additional amount. And this is all heals across the board and gets credited to you. So you actually get a large amount of extra healing based on your crit. So stacking crit becomes very valuable and effective for Brewmasters. And lastly, you have Brewmaster's Balance. This gives you more stamina and armor based on, just being a monk. You have other specs won't be as tanky because this is only available to the Brewmaster specialization. So based on that, we know that we want to be keeping Keg Smash on a relative cooldown. We want to be using Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick to make sure we're spawning orbs. We're triggering our Shuffle and keeping that up at all times. You want to make sure you have that. So you're kind of using these abilities in rotation to keep yourself going. You also have Breath of Fire, which is this attack here. You'll do fire in a cone in front of you. What's great about this is you have some other effects that we'll talk about in a second that affect it, but it also gives you a DR, a damage reduction for damage dealt on the target that you breathe on. And if you do the Keg Smash into the breath, you'll get an extra benefit, which is really nice. You want to be using that Keg Smash into the Breath of Fire. If you're talented into it, you can even reset the cooldown Breath of Fire when you throw out your Keg Smash, which gives you a lot of ways to really just keep things moving and staying tanky. Your defensive cooldowns as a tank are very much tied to your stagger. You do have options for popping these to bridge the gap, and it will help you build up stagger on pull. You'll run things like Fortifying Brew, which has a relatively long cooldown. You can talent into it to reduce it, but it's really good. It gives you maximum HP and reduces all damage you take, and it does last a good amount of time. You also have Dampen Harm as an option. Sometimes you won't run this, and sometimes you won't run Diffuse Magic, but Dampen Harm is a 2-minute cooldown that reduces damage taken based on how big the damage is for physical attacks, well, all attacks. And you have Diffuse Magic for magic if you feel like there's a magic encounter. There's a lot of times where you will be running this just to make sure that you have magic reduction in some way. It's one of the weak spots for Brewmaster. but sometimes you may not need it depending on what you're running up against. Maybe stagger is going to be enough just to deal with it, but that gives you that. When you have your Celestial summoned, you extend more stagger to him, the Black Ox, to keep that going. And then you have some really cool options like Zen Meditation. This is kind of more of an advanced ability, as while you're channeling this, you are interrupted by damage if you don't have a talent for it, but it reduces the damage you take. So what some people will do is they'll like ring a piece, come over and then do Zen Meditation, or if they're being targeted by ranged, or they're ticking on dot damage or pulse damage, then they'll do that and they stand still and kind of deal with it. But you can modify it so that it doesn't get canceled when you move or you're hit by a melee attack. So you're at a range, you can use it. And if you want to use it more, you can also use it with less effectiveness. But it's kind of an advanced technique, because if you get meleeed or you move, it'll get canceled. So you have to kind of be careful about how you use it. Now let's talk about talent build for Brewmaster. There's a lot of variants in here, but I'm gonna give you one build that will cover you in all situations for Mythic Plus. And we'll talk about the points that you can spend or reallocate if you need specific situations that might arise in the Mythic Pluses you're doing. Down below in the description, I'll have this build up for you. This is pretty much the best build that you can pick up for Brewmaster, but there's going to be some variants that we'll talk about. I call this Bonedust Dragonfire because there's two major builds to look at. You can do Dragonfire Brew or you can do Charred Passions. It's pretty much accepted by everyone that Dragonfire Brew is better overall than Charred Passions. This one is a lot of fun to play, and it affects your Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick. But when you look at the damage numbers and the parses, especially over the course of Season 1, it has been shown that Dragonfire Brew is just better. So that's the build that I'm going to give you now. And then I'll also have this labeled as Bonedust because some builds don't run Bonedust Brew. But I think especially for Mythic Plus, that extra AoE, especially if you're running Bountiful Brew, to get free Bonedust on top of it, it makes a big difference in gaining threat on pull and also being able to kill large packs of mobs. So if you'd like to use this build, you just have to grab the string that's down below in the description, hit import in game, take the string, enter it, give it a name, and hit import, and you got yourself a build directly into your client. Now let's talk about some of the major specifics here for this build. We'll start with the specialization tree because it's more pertinent to what we're talking about here. You absolutely need to have the essentials, which is going to be Celestial Brew, Breath of Fire, Purifying Brew, and Keg Smash. These are your core abilities. Brewmaster doesn't really work without them. There's no reason not to have them, so you're going to have them in every build. They're just too good. Celestial Brew is definitely one of your best abilities, so you want to be picking that up. There's some other things in here that are nice, like Gift of the Ox and Spirit of the Ox. You're going to pick those up because they give you extra free healing, which is nice. Some builds, specifically raiding builds, will use Healing Elixir, which is a 30-second 2-charge cooldown that allows you to heal yourself. You don't really need things like Bonedust in raid, so you kind of reallocate these points over to things like Healing Elixir because it's just another way to keep yourself healthy, especially if you're taking big damage from like Broodkeeper or Kurog, where they have those big debuffs. It's nice to have the extra healing to be able to keep yourself alive while you're raiding. But we're talking about Mythic Plus. Now, one of the big contention areas that you might want to consider when you're importing this build is whether or not you want to have Rushing Jade Wind. This is a quintessential Brewmaster ability. It is, you activate it, and then you just have this aura of damage ticking around you at all times for the duration of it. And you can have 100% uptime. Every time you activate it, the cooldown is shorter than the duration. So you can always have Rushing Jade Wind active. It gives you more threat. It gives you more damage. It's super nice and overall a good throughput increase. The reason I mention this though is for many players, especially when they're first playing Brewmaster, again, it can feel like a lot of abilities. You have more buttons than any other tank in the game and you have to be using them all. And so if you want to reduce the amount of buttons you're pressing or how you're playing the game initially, you can remove Rushing Jade Wind and get Special Delivery instead, which gives you a free keg in the air with more damage. Overall, the throughput's gonna be higher with Rushing Jade Wind, but it's another, like every 7 seconds, you have to be refreshing Rushing Jade Wind and keeping it up. And that's another button to be pressing while you're doing everything. So if you want to simplify it, you can pick up Special Delivery. It's slightly worse, but it removes a button from your global cooldown overwhelming nightmare that is Brewmaster. You definitely want to pick up Improved Purifying Brew. Being able to purify multiple times is amazing. You also want to pick up Guy Plin's Imperial Brew, which gives you more healing damage off the stagger. So you definitely want to be picking that up. The other contentious point is going to be this point right here. For the same reason we just talked about for Rushing Jade Wind is going to be Black Ox Brew. So your choice here is either Black Ox Brew, which is a 2-minute cooldown. When you drink this, it instantly refills your energy to full. It refreshes all charges of Purifying Brew and resets the cooldown on Celestial Brew. So, it is another cooldown, but it means you can be a little more aggressive with purifying more often, using Celestial Brew on cooldown, and spending your energy to stack up, say, your set bonus. And then you can use Black Ox Brew so that you can be more specific with how you utilize it. But again, it is another button, it is another cooldown, and you can get by using Bob and Weave, which just passively makes your stagger better. So rather than having to be more intelligent in 5-head and using Black Ox Brew to manage your defensiveness, instead, you can just go for Bob and Weave. If you do this and you get special delivery, that's 2 keys you can just remove. You don't have to worry about, and simplifies your rotation and your awareness so you can learn Brewmaster in a little bit of a safer environment. Now let's talk about the fire portion, the Breath of Fire, and these 3 talent choices here. This is kind of where things were interesting at the start of Season 1. We actually saw at the very beginning of preseason, Charred Passions was kind of the go-to, which is really cool, but Dragonfire Brew ended up winning out. And the way this works is that when you have Breath of Fire, there's ways that you can modify this. The first one is when you use Keg Smash, the remaining cooldown on Breath of Fire is reset. This is the one I was talking about earlier, where you can, say put Breath of Fire on cooldown, you can throw Keg Smash, now Breath of Fire is back. You can throw a Keg Smash, now Breath of Fire is back, right? So it's nice because you can always get the bonus from Keg Smash. And the reason you want that is targets affected by Keg Smash before you Breath of Fire will burn with a dot damage, and then also gives the reduced damage. You always want to be doing Keg Smash before Breath of Fire so that you can get that damage reduction on them so they deal less damage to you. And also so you can do some dot damage, which means you're building more threat and you're killing the enemies. It's all good stuff. So that is why I would recommend picking up Salabim's Strength if you're new to Brewmaster, because it just means that you can always get value out of that. There's some situations where Scalding Brew can be more valuable because it gives more damage on Keg Smash, especially if you're intelligently using Weapons of Order, which resets Keg Smash. So it's kind of more of an advanced technique, but for this build, I would say this one is just fine. This build is competitive. You can clear all the way, any M+ can be done with this build, but there's some optimizations or changes you can make as you go along. And again, Dragonfire Brew is just after using Breath of Fire, you breathe additional times, and Breath of Fire damage is increased by up to double value based on your level of stagger. So as stagger goes higher, you deal more damage, and then if you have Dragonfire Brew, you'll breathe, and then breathe, and then breathe, and you're just constantly doing this AoE. And then again, if you Keg Smash, reset, breathe, and then breathe, and then breathe, and you're just doing tons and tons of AoE damage, building threat. And again, that damage goes up the more stagger you have, which reiterates my earlier point of Brewmasters are stronger the more they're being hit really hard. The more stagger they have, the tankier they get, the more dangerous and offensive they become. So they're at their best when they're just being absolutely murdered by a bunch of mobs or a boss. Next, you have Exploding Keg, which is a 1-minute cooldown and just throws a keg. I would recommend putting this as all of the brews that you have. I would recommend putting this on an Et Cursor macro. This just makes it so you don't have to target it and then throw it. So like, for example, something like this that I have for Ring of Peace. I have all of my brews that I throw on a cursor macro, which means that if I just aim and hit the button, it'll go where my cursor is without having that extra input. It just makes it nice because you have so many of these. Even kind of like putting down like your tiger statue, I have that on an Et Cursor, so I don't have to click and then click. But for Ring of Peace, that can be very specific where you place it. I do leave that on the normal casting method, and I'll put down below in the description the cursor macro that you can use for these as well. But Exploding Keg is super nice. It's a big burst of damage. It's just great once you get the mobs clumped up for trash pulls, or if you're trying to do some burst damage on a boss. It will deal damage to all enemies in the area when it lands. It'll cause your attacks to deal additional fire damage, which is awesome. And it'll cause their melee attacks to deal crazy reduced damage for the next 3 seconds. So you can actually use this in certain situations where you know you're about to get hit really hard in melee. You can throw Exploding Keg on top of them in that moment, and you can reduce the damage. Another great optimization for Brewmaster. So, you can just kind of use that for defense. And then picking this up allows you to pick up Stormstout's Last Keg. It is so hard to play Brewmaster without this talent. What this does is it increases the damage of Stormstout's of Keg Smash, and then it gives Keg Smash an additional charge, which means you can throw and you can breathe and you can throw and you can breathe, and it gives you that extra control. And one of your best ways to build threat on pull is Keg Smash. You want to get Keg Smash on as many targets as you can, get that rolling fire dot, get that damage reduction. So having Keg Smash with an additional charge is compulsory. You have to have this. Bonedust Brew is a Shadowlands ability that we got from Covenant. It is super nice and flexible. They kept it for Mistweaver for a while and ended up getting rid of it, but I think it works great for Brewmaster. And what this does is you throw out a Bonedust Brew, it hits the enemies and marks them for 10 seconds. Your abilities have a 50% chance to affect the target a second time at a reduced portion, whether it's healing, including yourself, and shadow damage. So as you throw this out, you can actually get bonus heals on yourself from the heals that you cast. You'll throw out damage and it'll echo that damage on the target, again, giving you more AoE. It's super satisfying to get a big old Mythic Plus pull, throw out Bonedust Brew on top, especially if you're running Bountiful Brew, which means that as you're using abilities, you'll occasionally throw out a Bonedust Brew, which gives you free echoing damage, which is nice. And the other benefit of this is that Tiger Palm and Keg Smash reduce the cooldown of your brews by an additional 1 second if they're hitting a target that has Bonedust Brew active. This makes it so that even if you don't get full value out of that damage or healing window of Bonedust Brew, you still get to reduce your brews, which is awesome. So like having that as an option is really nice. It means that you can reduce Purifying Brew, Celestial Brew. Having those reset makes you tankier. It all fits really well together. So you kind of throw this down. You can see how the target has a debuff on them. As I Tiger Palm on top of them, and I use Keg Smash, which I'm always using anyways, I'm using these together. It reduces the cooldowns on my brews, which makes me tankier. Next is Weapons of Order, which is another Covenant ability from Shadowlands. This was the Kyrian Covenant ability, and this one's super fun. You activate it, and for the next 30 seconds, your mastery is increased by 10%. This mastery helps you out a tremendous amount, makes you tankier, gives you more benefits, and you want to have that. But the cool part about Weapons of Order is when you activate it, Keg Smash's cooldown is instantly reset, which means you always want to try and use Weapons of Order when you have no charges of of Keg Smash up. You activate this, get the mastery, and then you can reset your Keg Smash, which we know activates, your shuffle. It gives you more of your elusive brawler, right? Like all of these abilities all stacked together. You want to be using these regularly to trigger all these effects. But when you activate this, then you have it active, and then targets that have Keg Smash on them take additional damage from you for 10 seconds that stacks. So if you can Keg Smash, Weapons of Order, Keg Smash, reset, Keg Smash, and you're doing that in AoE hitting multiple targets, you're doing more damage to them every time you Keg Smash, which makes Keg Smash better, and then you do exploding kegs. Like all this stuff fits together. It's awesome. You get so many cool synergies that fit together. We already talked about Zen Meditation, which is a very niche ability, but when you master it, is very rewarding. Then you have your Celestial, which you're gonna run in almost all situations. Not only does it give you AoE damage, because when you summon your Ox, which lasts for 25 seconds, by the way, when you do, when he attacks damage, he'll periodically do stomps, which is big AoE. Do you see that stomp effect? He'll be doing that periodically, doing bunts of AoE damage, so it's great to pop him on big AoE pulls to give that extra damage there. But again, for the 25 seconds that he's out, damage delayed by stagger is staggered by him instead of you. So you actually get tankier and that stagger gets sent over him. So it's great to do on big pulls, not only because you're doing more damage, but also because he's taking some of that damage off of you. And lastly, let's point out some important talents you want to know that are there. They're not abilities, but it is something that you can be aware of. The first is going to be Shadowboxing Treads. While you have this active, Blackout Kick's damage is increased, and Cleaves, which means that when you're attacking targets, you're doing that Blackout Kick to give yourself your shuffle and cause orbs to spawn and trigger more bonuses. You're also cleaving with it, which means that whether you're doing AoE or single target, you're dealing damage in AoE, building threat in AoE, and also making yourself tankier, which has a nice synergy with Hit Scheme over here, which is when you deal damage with Blackout Kick, it increases the damage of your next Keg Smash by 10%, stacking up to 4 times. But if Blackout Kick hits 2 additional targets, that means that when you do an AoE, you'll get 3 stacks of Hit Scheme because you hit 3 times. So again, makes you tankier, does more damage, good stuff. Next, let's go through your class tree, some options here to pick up and how these builds will change. This changes quite a bit whether you're doing Raid or M+, and depending on which M+ you're doing, you may want to pick up Detox, you may not want Diffuse Magic, you may want to get Generous Pour or maybe an extra point in Bounce Back, you may not want White Tiger Statue, depending on the situation, or maybe you want 1 point of close to heart. There's definitely some flexibility there. Firstly, you have your Chi abilities, Chi Wave and Chi Burst. Chi Wave is a little bit more effective overall. What this does is that when you hit a target with Chi Wave, it'll bounce red and then go green and red and green and green, and it'll just bounce back between friendly and enemy targets, which heals you and deals damage. And it's on a pretty short cooldown, 15 seconds. You can use it regularly. However, the reason I highlight this is because you can also run Chi Burst. It's twice the cooldown, and what Chi Burst does is it sends out this little Kamehameha that rolls forward and does damage to everyone it passes through, and can heal as well. But the reason you might pick this up is if you have really far-ranging pulls that you'll have to grab. It's not great you can pull with your regular lightning attack, which is built into the monk kit, which are Crackling Jade Lightning, but you can see that it does cost a decent amount of energy when you do this, which is pretty annoying. So you can kind of do this in channel. It takes all your energy away, and it's not great. What you can do to pull with this is you can hit it and then move, hit it and then move, and that gives you your pull, but it doesn't have the same range that Chi Wave or Chi Burst would have. So if you want to get further pulls that are a little bit safer, you can hit Chi Burst and it'll do AoE when it hits all the targets along the way. You need to become intimately familiar with Ring of Peace, because this is probably one of the most flexible abilities in the game. And if you can master this, it is so incredibly amazing. What this does is you put a ring on the ground. Any enemies that touch the ring are bounced back from the center of the ring. So if they come in from this angle, they'll go backwards this way. Go in this way, they'll go backwards that way. So not only is this great for keeping mobs from moving, separating them, getting them off objectives. So like Court of Stars, when the sentry's trying to set off the alarm, you can bounce them off of it. In Shadowmoon Burial Ground, on the first boss, when the ad's coming to the boss, you can keep it away. In Nakut Offensive, on Granith, the first boss, depending on your route, when the mob is running across trying to get to the catapult to sabotage it, you can block them. So having Ring of Peace makes that amazing. But it can also interrupt because it does do a knockback. So what you can do is you can interrupt casters anyway. And the more you play, the more comfortable with this you get. But say that this person right here is casting, I can just do this where the Ring of Peace spawns right next to them. And then if it's an enemy, it'll bump them and interrupt their casting. So you can actually be, way over here fighting mobs as a caster back here. And then basing on how you land your Ring of Peace, you can knock them towards you to group mobs up. You can interrupt spell casting. You can stop any kind of nasty thing that they're doing. And you don't even have to be standing next to them to do it either. You can also use it defensively. So you can put Ring of Peace in between you. You can get some distance, put Ring of Peace down, and then you can Zen Meditation. So you're taking range damage, you're being reduced. You can also kite this way using Ring of Peace. The utilization of this ability is endless, and I recommend you experiment as much as you can because it's so amazing what this ability can do. You also have Transcendence, which is available to all monk specs, another niche ability that can be really valuable. You activate Transcendence, it'll put a spirit at the location you were at, and then you can use your second ability, Transcendence Transfer, to teleport to it, and then the spirit goes there, and then it'll stay there, and then the transfer goes on cooldown, and you can do it again. But this is great for knockback effects, or if you're trying to kite really well. It's super nice if you know there's a knockback coming. You can put this down, you get knocked back, and then while you're in the air, you teleport to this. You didn't go anywhere. You didn't get knocked. You didn't go anywhere. You're standing right in place, and it's useful for positioning mobs and moving around the field as well. Your range CC Paralysis is also useful for interrupting spell casting or CCing a mob. You can just cast this on mobs that are specifically, I guess, any target can be incapacitated. But it's a 1 minute cooldown, instant hit. If they take damage, it'll break it. But it's useful for, CCing a mob. You want to be aware of this and use it often when you can. Even if it's just to interrupt a spell cast, you can do it if they're a target that can be incapacitated. You want to be using Tiger's Lust as well, which is a very flexible short cooldown buff. What this does is it boosts the movement speed of a target by 70%. So you can target yourself with it, activate Tiger's Lust, and move and reposition to get that going. But it does, on cast, remove roots and snares. So if you get rooted by something, like Azure Vault has plenty of roots in it that you can get rid of. You can also cast it on like a healer that may get stuck somewhere, cast it on them, get them out of the position they're in, or just use it to kind of reposition. But you want to be using this regularly. The last ability that we'll mention before we go into rotation and how to play is Summon White Tiger Statue. This one is super nice for just free AoE damage. It's a 2 minute cooldown. When you activate it and place it down on the ground, it will just pulse AoE damage to targets that are nearby, which is super nice. So while this is there, pulsing damage to all enemies. It just pulses, and they have to be in combat, so it'll pulse there, but you'll see that damage going out. And again, on really big pulls, since it does last a good 30 seconds, you can get a big fat pull going, put down White Tiger statue, Bonedust brew, and just start slaying and doing tons of damage. So Brewmaster has crazy burst damage potential and awesome AoE damage potential with all the abilities when they all come together. And now that we know all the mechanics, we have a build, you can import it, you're all set for talents. Let's talk about rotation, how to play the class, how to use your cooldowns, how to pull, how to get aggro, all of that stuff. The number one thing that tanks need to know how to do and do very confidently, which is very common for new tanks, is to pull and get aggro. And so usually when I teach people how to tank, I talk about how to do that exactly for Brewmaster. The number one way you're gonna be doing that is with Keg Smash. You wanna make sure that you can hit as many targets as you can with Keg Smash, follow up with a breath, especially now when we're running Dragonfire, you'll be able to get that extra dot damage, and getting that initial damage on the targets as fast as you can reduces the chance that people pull aggro from you and helps you stay in, ahead of the whole aggro game. After about 5 seconds or so, it'll be hard for people to pull aggro from you as long as you're effectively dealing damage to all the targets that you have pulled. From there, your goal is to get stagger rolling immediately. And the best way to do that is to be taking damage, obviously. You'll want to kind of figure out, based on your play style, when you want to do your first Purifying Brew. If you're just starting out and playing Brewmaster, I recommend just popping Purifying Brew as soon as you have staggers, that you're putting that rolling on cooldown. Even if you only take a little bit of damage and you purify, you'll get an extra stack and you'll put that on cooldown so you're not sitting on it forever, which is nice, and it's kind of working its way back as well. Next, your priority is to keep Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick on cooldown at all times. We know it adds your shuffle. We know that it has a chance to spawn these orbs here, which when we expel harm, boom, it was like a full heal I just got from those 4 orbs. It's super important. It also gives you Elusive Brawler, so you need to be having Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick on cooldown pretty much all the time. So that's kind of your core rotation, is keeping those on cooldown, trying to spawn as much as you can and keep that going. Then as you build up stagger, you're purifying in order to get that going. And then when you really need health, activate Expel Harm. Not only will Expel Harm heal you, and in this build that I gave you, you have some extra modifiers for Expel Harm to make it stronger, but it also will suck in any of the orbs you've been spawning, like these here. The more you use your Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick, the more orbs you spawn, the more you can heal yourself. So you're just kind of keeping that on rotation. Your next big priority is to be using your Keg Smash and then using Breath of Fire, because it does the debuff on the target. That means that you take less damage from them. And it's also great for building threat. And it's one of your highest damage dealing abilities, which is super important. So you want to be keeping Keg Smash on at least 1 on cooldown, and then using Breath of Fire. Then you keep your Blackout Kick, Rising Sun Kick on cooldown. And then you're healing when you need to and purifying when you need to. And then when you get into trouble, when you're ready, you want to be using your Celestial Brew. There's a lot to talk about on this, and I don't really want to go into full extended, niche details on Celestial Brew. This is essentially just a personal absorb shield. You activate this, you have an absorb shield. The more purifies you use before you use Celestial Brew, the bigger the absorb shield gets, up to 10 stacks. Super nice, but the cooldown's pretty short. You can get it, they reduced it down to like 45 seconds, and then with other effects, you can get it down to like 36 seconds. So it's not that long of a cooldown, all things considered. So you don't really want to be just purifying and never using your Celestial Brew, but you also, want to be getting as much value out of as you can. So you want to be kind of taking enough damage in order to get your stagger up, purifying that, which will heal you. You're spawning orbs, you're getting extra effects on that. Big bonus there, popping, keeping these on cooldown. Your orb spawn, you heal yourself. Oh no, I'm in trouble. Boom, big brew. And you can eat mechanics this way that can bridge the gap. So the trick with this is you need to get enough stagger rolling so that when you're purifying, not only are you purifying enough stagger to make the ability useful, but also you're healing yourself for the damage that you cleared, so you're kind of keeping that going. The trick with Brewmaster, and especially Mythic Plus, is that you are your weakest at the start of the pull. So you have to be very careful about walking into a pull when you have no stagger, you have nothing built up, and you're not really, you have nothing on the ground, you have no shuffle, you're very weak on pull. So usually the best thing to do on pull is to pop a cooldown. Either use your Dispel Harm, if you want to be using Dispel or Dampen Harm, or you want to be using your Fortifying Brew. This gets you right off the bat a nice start into the pulse. You can fortify, turn gray, take that damage, increase your health, and this helps you build up a whole bunch of stagger that you can then start cleansing, which makes you stronger and heals you, deals more damage. Then you can, pop your cooldowns, get extra bonus on there, and just keep those on cooldown. And that's the core of the rotation. That is the very basic of the rotation, is using those 3 defensive cooldowns to get stagger. Once you have stagger, purify it to heal yourself, keep Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick on cooldown, keep Keg Smash on at least 1 cooldown, and Breath of Fire on cooldown. Use Expel Harm when you're in trouble, purify when you have stagger, try to save it for as long as you can, but don't hold on to it for too long. And then when you're in trouble or a big hit's coming, use Celestial Brew to get that bonus from it. Then, once you kind of have that core, this is where the overwhelming aspect comes in. And the reason why I wanted to separate the fundamentals from the other abilities, because it really does function that way. If you're just doing this rotation properly, keeping these abilities on cooldown, managing your stagger and healing yourself, you're doing most of what Brewmaster needs to be doing in order to be effective. Then you start adding in the crazy amount of buttons that they have. So you can do, obviously, you can put down your White Tiger statue for AoE. You can throw out your Bonedust brew for AoE. You can also throw out your Exploding Keg for AoE, or reduce physical damage that you take from melee as well. You can spawn your Celestial Beam. You can throw out your Chi Wave. You can also use your Black Ox brew to reset your brews once you've already brewed. And then on top of that, you can also Ring of Peace, and then you can walk away, and you can Zen Meditation, and you can do all these extra things that really aren't as important as the core rotation, but they all have good value. Especially things like, like Weapons of Order, popping this after. But again, I would work on getting the core, stagger, brew management, damage output, keeping your passives rolling mastered, and then you can start working in these extra buttons. And it's also, by the way, why I recommend newer Brewmasters not run Rushing Jade Wind, because every 8 seconds you have to press this. If you forget, you lose effectiveness out of it, and there's so many other things you're doing that it can be very helpful to kind of keep that reduced and keep that going, right? So you kind of have all that. So that's the core of it. Get the core fundamentals going of keeping those abilities on cooldown, get as much passive as you can, and get your stagger as high as you can, and then start working in these extra abilities for extra benefits and bonus. And that's how you play Brewmaster. Now, I love Brewmaster and Mythic Plus because you can regularly, at high keys, get to red stagger, which means your stagger meter just fills up like crazy. You're just taking so much ridiculous damage at all times that you're always building up nutso amounts of stagger, and that allows you to do some really cool stuff, right? Because we know that when you stagger and you're running the extra bonus, the Purify, you can heal yourself for the amount that's there, you can spawn more orbs, you can get more bonuses off of it, and so you get that extra bit. Plus, the more you cleanse, the stronger it makes you. It all lends itself together really well. And so, once we got the kind of core rotation down and the cooldowns, the thing I'll leave you with is mastering Brewmaster is learning to be patient with your health bar. You want to build as much stagger as you possibly can before you purify. You want to build as many stacks of your Purify Chi that you can before you use Celestial Brew. And those all get better the more patient you are. But that means you have to be comfortable dropping HP and watching that health bar yo-yo and jump around and letting that stagger get higher and higher, because there's a diminishing return on whether the sooner you cleanse, the less stagger you'll have cleansed. But if you don't cleanse soon enough, you won't get regular cooldown rolling. So there's kind of like that min-max. So that would be my recommendation for the class, is just play through the basics, start adding in these extra abilities and use them on cooldown, but kind of manage that and keep that going. The difference for single target versus AoE, by the way, is if you're doing single target, your filler is going to be Tiger Palm. We know Tiger Palm has tons of really cool bonuses. Not only does it increase, it affects your set bonus, by the way, Brewmaster's Rhythm, which is every time you Spinning Crane Kick or you use Tiger Palm, you'll get stacks of this, which makes your damage dealt increase, damage taken reduced, and you purify more for every stack, which is nice. So you have those going for you, so you kind of fill it in. But you can think of single target as filling with Tiger Palm and AoE filling as your Spinning Crane Kick. Since you're not running Charred Passions, which affects how you use Spinning Crane Kick, if you're just going to be running this build, which is the best build right now, you can just use Spinning Crane Kick as a way to spend energy, mark targets with your Mystic passive, which reduces or increases the damage physical damage that targets take. So you want to kind of at least do this once hit all targets, make sure that they all have Mystic Touch on them so they take more physical damage, and then you're just using this as a filler to spend your energy, and when everything else is on cooldown, you're kind of keeping that. So that's Brewmaster. I could go on, but I want to make this video, I mean, it's already too long as it is, so I'm going to cut it there, but hopefully this gives you everything that you need to get started as a Mythic Plus Brewmaster. It's a lot of fun. Don't let people dissuade you from it. The complexity comes from the fact that they have so many buttons, but the most important part of Brewmaster is this tight-knit core of managing your brews, your kicks, your offense, and your stagger. Master that, and then just add on cooldowns on top of it, and you'll have it all figured out. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below. Subscribe for more gaming content, and as always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you can come by my live stream. I'm live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say howdy. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.